Kwame Kilpatrick's political career, initially marked by rapid ascent and national promise, ultimately devolved into one of the most significant public corruption scandals in American history. Once hailed as Detroit's youngest mayor and a symbol of revitalization, Kilpatrick's tenure was systematically undermined by pervasive financial misconduct, a notorious perjury scandal, and an extensive federal racketeering enterprise. This exposé details his rise, the specific nature and scale of his criminal activities, including misuse of city funds, extortion, and perjury, and the profound and lasting implications for Detroit's governance, financial stability, and public trust. The analysis reveals how a charismatic leader's betrayal of public office led to severe legal consequences and prompted critical reforms aimed at safeguarding civic integrity. Welcome to Corrupt Roots, where money, power, and scandal collide. If you're fascinated by the dark side of Wall Street, Ponzi schemes, insider trading, and the most notorious financial crimes in U.S. history, you're in the right place. Every week, we uncover the twisted truths behind the biggest white-collar scandals, from boardroom betrayals to billion-dollar frauds. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with fellow true crime fans. Drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts and tell us what cases or topics you want us to dig into next. Because corruption has deep roots, and we're digging them up, one case at a time. Now, back to the exposé. Kwame Kilpatrick's early life, educational background, and swift rise through Michigan's political ranks established the foundation for his initial perception as a rising star. His trajectory demonstrated a blend of inherited political capital and cultivated public appeal, setting high expectations for his leadership. Kwame Kilpatrick was born on June 6, 1970, in Detroit, Michigan, into a family deeply involved in the political landscape. His mother, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, served as a congresswoman and state representative, while his father, Bernard Kilpatrick, held a position with the Wayne County Executive. This familial background fostered a narrative that politics was inherently in his blood. Kilpatrick's educational journey began at Cass Technical High School in Detroit. He then attended Florida A&M University, graduating with honors in 1992 with a Bachelor of Science degree in political science. During his time at Florida A&M, he distinguished himself as the captain of the football team and became a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He further pursued his legal education, earning a Juris Doctor degree from Detroit College of Law, now Michigan State University College of Law, in 1999. Prior to holding elected office, Kilpatrick contributed to the community as a teacher within the Detroit public school system. His political career formally commenced in 1996 when he was elected to the Michigan House of Representatives, directly filling the seat previously held by his mother. At just 26 years old, his immediate entry into the legislature underscored his early political momentum. A critical observation regarding Kilpatrick's early career is how his familial background served as a significant accelerant to his political rise. The consistent presence of his parents in politics and his direct succession of his mother's legislative seat provided an immediate, pre-existing political infrastructure. This inherited network offered him instant name recognition, established connections, and a foundational understanding of political processes, which markedly expedited his career trajectory. His swift ascent to the youngest minority leader and subsequently the youngest mayor was not solely a testament to his individual abilities, but heavily leveraged this inherited advantage. This suggests that his initial rising star status was, in part, an endowment, setting a precedent for high expectations that may have contributed to his later pressures and downfall. During his tenure in the Michigan House of Representatives, Kilpatrick quickly established himself as an effective legislator. He played a pivotal role in brokering the $675 million Clean Michigan Initiative, a substantial legislative accomplishment aimed at urban renewal. This initiative notably designated 60% of its funds directly to Detroit, recognizing the city as the state's largest and most in-need urban center. Beyond this, he successfully secured a deal to preserve healthcare funding for low-income individuals and spearheaded efforts to raise millions to combat lead poisoning in Detroit, addressing a critical public health concern. Kilpatrick's influence and charismatic appeal extended beyond state-level politics, garnering him national recognition. He delivered addresses at the Democratic National Convention in Los Angeles in 2000 and again in Boston in 2004. In 2000, the Democratic Leadership Council, a prominent modernizing faction associated with the Clinton and Gore era, identified Kilpatrick as one to watch, further solidifying his national profile. He also held significant leadership positions, serving as vice president of the National Conference of Democratic Mayors and as a trustee of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. His legislative achievements, particularly those directly benefiting Detroit, coupled with his prominent speaking engagements at national conventions and leadership roles in national mayoral organizations, indicate a deliberate and successful strategy to build both local credibility and a national political brand. The recognition from the Democratic Leadership Council was a direct acknowledgement of his perceived effectiveness and charismatic appeal. This suggests that his rising star image was carefully cultivated through a combination of impactful policy work and calculated public relations, projecting an image of a capable and forward-thinking leader. In 2001, Kilpatrick transitioned from state legislature to municipal leadership, running for mayor of Detroit. He decisively defeated City Council President and former police chief Gil Hill in the general election, securing 54% of the vote. At just 31 years old, this victory made him the youngest individual ever elected to lead the Motor City. His election was widely perceived as a new dawn for Detroit, especially for its predominantly black population, and he quickly earned the moniker of America's first hip-hop mayor. In his inaugural address, he articulated a three-point initiative for his term, expressing a deep personal commitment to creating a better city, stating that his entire family dwells within the walls of the city of Detroit. Early in his mayoral tenure, Kilpatrick demonstrated an innovative approach to urban challenges. He established a Homeland Security Council and initiated work on a strategic management center designed to systematically identify emerging problems, extending beyond terrorism to include preparedness for natural disasters and blackouts. He also co-chaired the Border Task Force on Homeland Security at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Despite facing early controversies, Kilpatrick was re-elected in 2005, a notable political comeback given he had polled second in the primary against Freeman Hendricks and faced considerable media skepticism. Kilpatrick's ascent to mayor, particularly as the hip-hop mayor, embodied a profound sense of hope and revitalization for Detroit, a city grappling with significant challenges. His initial policy focus on urban issues and even innovative approaches to homeland security presented an image of a dedicated and capable leader. However, this initial promise stands in stark contrast to the systemic criminal activities that later defined his administration. This reveals how a charismatic leader, capable of inspiring public confidence and securing re-election despite early controversies, can simultaneously be engaged in profound public corruption. It highlights the vulnerability of a city's governance to figures who skillfully project an image of commitment while harboring hidden motives, suggesting that public trust, especially in times of great need, can be easily misplaced or exploited. The initial signs of trouble during Kilpatrick's first term, including questionable financial practices and highly publicized rumors, began to erode public confidence, foreshadowing the more severe scandals to come. Early in his mayoral tenure, Kilpatrick faced significant criticism for the misuse of city funds. This included the controversial leasing of a Lincoln Navigator for his family's use with city funds, and charging approximately $210,000 to the city for personal expenses such as spa massages, extravagant dining, and expensive wines on his city-issued credit card. He repaid only $9,000 of these charges. These actions directly contributed to subsequent lawsuits that cost the city of Detroit $14 million. Kilpatrick also faced scrutiny for his administrative decisions concerning public contracts. He leveraged his authority as Special Administrator of the Detroit Water Department, DWSD, to bypass the Water Board and City Council on 3 controversial contracts, including a $131 million radio system for police and fire departments, and a no-bid public relations contract to a close personal associate. Although a federal judge initially commended his stewardship of the department, questions regarding these contracts persisted. Further financial improprieties included directing $175,000 in state grant money to 2 nonprofit organizations controlled by friends. These organizations then subcontracted work to UNITE, a company owned by his wife, Carlita, who was the firm's sole employee. A second $250,000 installment was withheld when one of these groups refused to disclose how the funds were being spent. The city's financial oversight also deteriorated under his leadership, marked by substantial delays in filing audit reports, 14 months late for 2005 to 2006, and 11 months late for 2006 to 2007, incurring an additional $2.4 million in costs. In response, the state treasury withheld $35 million in monthly revenue sharing until the city secured approval for bond sales. Kilpatrick acknowledged partial blame, citing the layoff of too many accountants, but also assigned fault to the firm hired to replace them. The initial financial controversies, such as the Lincoln Navigator lease and lavish credit card spending, while significant, appear almost minor when compared to the later federal racketeering charges. However, these early instances of personal enrichment from public funds, coupled with the bypassing of established oversight bodies for contracts and the funneling of grant money to his wife's company, suggest a gradual and insidious normalization of illicit financial behavior. This pattern indicates that Kilpatrick's corruption was not a sudden collapse, but a progressive descent, where smaller abuses likely emboldened him and his associates, setting a dangerous precedent for the more extensive pay-to-play schemes that would later be exposed. This demonstrates a clear and escalating disregard for ethical governance and financial accountability from the nascent stages of his mayoral term. In the fall of 2002, rumors began to circulate regarding a wild party involving strippers at the Manugian mansion, the official city-owned residence of the mayor of Detroit. Allegations from former members of Kilpatrick's Executive Protection Unit (EPU), his police security detail, claimed that his wife, Carlita Kilpatrick, unexpectedly returned home and physically attacked an exotic dancer named Tamara Green. Officer Harold C. Nelthrope, an EPU member, contacted the Internal Affairs Unit of the Detroit Police Department in April 2003 to recommend an investigation into alleged abuses by the EPU, including these party rumors. Tragically, Tamara Green was murdered on April 30th, 2003, shot multiple times while sitting in her car. The weapon used was a .40 caliber Glock pistol, the same model and caliber as those officially issued by the Detroit Police Department at the time. Her family later filed a $150 million federal lawsuit against the city, alleging she was murdered to prevent her testimony about the Manugian Mansion party. An investigation conducted by Michigan Attorney General Mike Cox and the Michigan State Police found no evidence that the party took place. The lawsuit filed by Green's family was dismissed in late 2011 and the decision was affirmed by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. While the Manugian Mansion Party and Tamara Green murder allegations were officially unsubstantiated by formal investigations, their sensational nature and the detailed claims made by Kilpatrick's own security detail created a pervasive atmosphere of suspicion around his administration. Even without legal conviction, these persistent rumors, especially when coupled with later confirmed instances of deceit, significantly damaged public confidence. This illustrates how unproven but widely circulated allegations can severely undermine a public official's credibility and set the stage for increased scrutiny and public acceptance of subsequent verifiable scandals. The alleged attempts by high-ranking police personnel to sabotage investigations further amplified this distrust, suggesting a systemic breakdown of integrity within the city's leadership that extended beyond the mayor himself. By April 2005, Kilpatrick's approval rating in Detroit experienced a sharp decline. This erosion of public support was attributed not only to the accumulating scandals, but also to a perceived lack of tangible improvements within the city. The growing dissatisfaction culminated in his inclusion on Time magazine's April 17, 2005, list of the 3 worst big city mayors in the United States. A dubious distinction he shared with Dick Murphy of San Diego and John F. Street of Philadelphia. A significant blow to his administrative authority came in late 2005, when a federal judge, Judge Fikens, ended Kilpatrick's special administratorship of the Detroit Water Department. This decision was prompted by serious questions that arose concerning water department contracts, indicating a formal loss of control over a crucial city department due to concerns about his management. Kilpatrick's plummeting approval ratings were not solely a consequence of the salacious Manugian Mansion rumors or the initial financial improprieties. The explicit mention of a perceived lack of improvements in the city and the documented issues with late audit reports reveal a critical failure in fundamental governance and administrative efficacy. This suggests that while personal scandals often capture public attention, the tangible impact of poor leadership on essential city services and financial management is equally, if not more potent, in eroding public support. The formal stripping of his special administratorship over the Detroit Water Department serves as a direct institutional consequence of this perceived mismanagement, signaling a profound loss of confidence in his ability to govern responsibly. This highlights how a leader's personal ethical failings can directly translate into a diminished capacity to effectively manage public affairs. The perjury scandal proved to be a pivotal moment in Kilpatrick's downfall, marked by a whistleblower lawsuit, the explosive discovery of text messages, and his subsequent resignation. The origins of the perjury scandal can be traced to a 2003 civil lawsuit filed by former Detroit police bodyguard Harold Nelthrope and former Deputy Police Chief Gary Brown. They alleged that their firings were in retaliation for an internal affairs investigation led by Brown, during which Nelthrope had reported rumors of a party at the mayor's mansion. Both plaintiffs claimed that Kilpatrick was motivated to fire them due to his concern that the investigation would expose his extramarital affairs. The trial for this lawsuit commenced in August 2007. During their sworn testimonies, both Mayor Kilpatrick and his chief of staff, Christine Beatty, explicitly denied having an extramarital affair with each other. In September 2007, after only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found in favor of Nelthrope and Brown, awarding them $6.5 million in damages. Kilpatrick publicly stated his intention to appeal the verdict, attributing the outcome to the racial composition of the jury. The act of perjury itself, lying under oath about the affair, was a direct legal offense that carried significant weight. However, its true impact extended far beyond the immediate lie. This act was not merely about a personal indiscretion, but represented a deliberate attempt to obstruct justice and conceal potentially broader misconduct, specifically the retaliatory firings of the whistleblowers. When this deception was later exposed, it irrevocably shattered any remaining public trust and provided irrefutable evidence of a profound lack of integrity. This moved the public and legal narrative from mere allegations to proven deceit, making Kilpatrick's position as mayor untenable and directly triggering his resignation and initial criminal charges. The perjury acted as the critical legal and moral tipping point for his political demise. In October 2007, a pivotal development occurred when plaintiff's attorney Mike Stefani received thousands of text messages via subpoena. These messages unequivocally indicated an extramarital affair between Kilpatrick and Beatty, directly contradicting their sworn testimonies. Immediately following the presentation of these files to city attorneys, Kilpatrick announced an agreement to settle the lawsuit for $8.4 million. The city council approved this deal, which initially included a controversial provision that Stefani would turn the incriminating text message files over to the mayor. This proviso was later removed from the main settlement document and placed into a confidential supplement after a Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request. The Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News subsequently filed a FOIA lawsuit seeking all settlement-related documents, and in February 2008, the Michigan Supreme Court ordered these documents to be turned over to the plaintiffs. The bulk of the text messages were finally released in late October 2008 by Circuit Court Judge Timothy Kenny, albeit with some redacted portions. These messages revealed not only romantic exchanges, but also discussions about the decision to fire Gary Brown, and, critically, explicit conversations about bid rigging, bribes, and other criminal activity. In the wake of the scandal, Christine Beatty resigned from her position as Kilpatrick's chief of staff. The Detroit City Council formally requested Kilpatrick's resignation as mayor and urged Governor Granholm to use her authority to remove him from office. Governor Granholm initiated an inquiry, stating her role would be functioning in a manner similar to that of a judicial officer. The discovery and subsequent public release of the text messages marked the definitive turning point in Kilpatrick's downfall. This was not a traditional paper trail, but rather digital communication, highlighting how modern technology, specifically the archiving capabilities of cell phone providers, became an unexpected and profoundly powerful tool for uncovering and proving corruption. The explicit nature of the messages, directly contradicting their sworn testimony and detailing criminal activities like bid rigging and bribes, made denial impossible and led directly to perjury charges. This incident demonstrates a broader implication for public officials that digital communications, even when conducted on city-owned equipment, are subject to public record laws and can serve as undeniable evidence. This fundamentally alters the landscape of public accountability, making plausible deniability significantly harder to maintain and underscoring the transparency risks inherent in digital communication for those in public office. Facing mounting pressure and overwhelming evidence from the text messages, Kwame Kilpatrick and Christine Beatty were formally charged with several criminal counts, including perjury, misconduct in office, and obstruction of justice. As a direct consequence of the scandal, and as part of a plea agreement, Kilpatrick resigned from his position as mayor of Detroit on September 18, 2008. Following his guilty plea to 2 felony counts of obstruction of justice, Kilpatrick was sentenced to 120 days in jail and 5 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay $1 million in restitution to the city of Detroit. He ultimately served 99 days of his jail sentence before being released on probation. Kilpatrick's initial plea agreement, which involved his resignation, a relatively short jail sentence, and a $1 million restitution order, appeared to offer a swift resolution to the perjury scandal. However, the subsequent events, his violation of probation by hiding assets and failing to pay restitution, leading to further state imprisonment, and the later extensive federal charges, reveal that this initial legal outcome was merely a temporary containment of his criminal activities, not a comprehensive reckoning. This highlights a critical limitation in the justice system's initial response, as it failed to fully uncover or address the deeper, systemic corruption that was already deeply ingrained in his administration. Love the dark side of Wall Street, Ponzi schemes, and financial crime? You're in the right place. We uncover the biggest white-collar scandals every week, from billion-dollar frauds to boardroom betrayals. Like, subscribe, and share with fellow true crime fans, and drop a comment to tell us what you want us to dig into next. Corruption runs deep, and we're exposing it, one case at a time. Now, back to the exposé. The slow descent continued, indicating that the initial punishment was insufficient to deter or fully expose the true extent of his criminal enterprise, setting the stage for a far more severe federal prosecution. The extensive federal investigation uncovered a sophisticated network of corruption, revealing the true scale of Kilpatrick's criminal activities beyond the perjury scandal. This period marked a profound transformation of public office into a systematic criminal enterprise. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, initiated an investigation into Kilpatrick in 2004, 2 years after he became mayor. This investigation eventually uncovered a wide-ranging racketeering conspiracy that permeated Detroit's city government. At the core of this conspiracy was a pay-to-play system established by Kilpatrick and his longtime contractor friend, Bobby Ferguson. This system normalized illicit activities, making breaking the law standard operating procedure within city government. Kilpatrick systematically used the power and authority of his mayoral office to extort municipal contractors, rig bids, and accept bribes. The central scheme involved coercing contractors to include Ferguson in public contracts and manipulating the award process to ensure Ferguson obtained a portion of the revenue from those contracts. A notable example involved a $50 million sewer lining contract that Kilpatrick held up until Inland Waters, the winning bidder, agreed to pay Ferguson. Ferguson ultimately received $24.7 million when the contract was increased to $138 million. In another instance, Kilpatrick delayed a $12 million amendment to a sewer lining contract until Inland Waters agreed to pay Ferguson $350,000 for work Ferguson never performed at a large sewer collapse site. The detailed accounts of the pay-to-play system and the explicit coercion of municipal contractors demonstrate that Kilpatrick's corruption was far from a series of isolated incidents. Instead, it reveals a deeply embedded and systematically organized criminal enterprise operating within City Hall. The central role of Bobby Ferguson and the widespread rigging of bids underscore that Kilpatrick leveraged his official authority to construct a parallel, illicit economic structure, effectively transforming public service into a personal profit center. The long-term FBI investigation, which began in 2004, further highlights the complexity and entrenched nature of this scheme, indicating that it was a pervasive and calculated operation rather than spontaneous acts of greed. Kilpatrick and Ferguson obtained over $500,000 from the state of Michigan and private donors for non-profit organizations they controlled. These organizations were ostensibly created to help the community, but the funds were instead diverted for personal use, including luxury vacations, spa treatments, and golf clubs for Kilpatrick and his family. Evidence showed Kilpatrick defrauded donors to his political entities, Kilpatrick for Mayor, the Kilpatrick Inaugural Committee, and the Kilpatrick Civic Fund, by receiving over $250,000 in cash kickbacks from his fundraising director. Furthermore, at least $200,000 from the Kilpatrick Civic Fund was used for personal expenses, another $200,000 for friends and family, and $150,000 for improper campaign expenses. During his tenure as mayor, Kilpatrick and his father, Bernard Kilpatrick, solicited and accepted over $1 million in payments and property from individuals and entities seeking business with the city or its general retirement system / police and fire pension funds. Specific instances included: Carl Cotto paid Kwame and Bernard Kilpatrick approximately $250,000 in cash for favorable treatment on cleaning and electrical contracts at Cobo Hall. John Rutherford provided over $300,000 in money and campaign-related payments in exchange for Kilpatrick's support of his waterfront casino development plan. Tony Soave provided over $300,000 in free private jet service and other benefits to ensure his business interests with the city were not harmed. Mark Andre Cunningham paid Bernard Kilpatrick at least $15,000 as a portion of his commission from a pension fund consulting deal, in return for Kwame Kilpatrick's support for his firm to manage pension fund monies. The extensive details regarding financial misconduct illustrate that Kilpatrick's corruption was not confined to a single scheme, but involved a sophisticated diversification of illicit revenue streams. This included direct extortion from municipal contractors, the systematic misappropriation of nonprofit organizational funds, the collection of campaign kickbacks, and the acceptance of personal bribes from a wide array of business interests. This demonstrates a highly opportunistic and calculated approach to exploiting every available avenue for personal and familial financial gain, indicating a deep-seated pattern of criminal behavior rather than isolated acts. The pervasive involvement of family members, Bernard Kilpatrick, Carlita, and close associates, Bobby Ferguson, fundraising director, further underscores the network-based and entrenched nature of this corruption, making it significantly more challenging for conventional oversight mechanisms to detect and dismantle. A key component of Kilpatrick's criminal enterprise was his deliberate attempt to conceal his public corruption by failing to report hundreds of thousands of dollars in illicit income to the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. The investigators discovered that after becoming mayor, Kilpatrick ceased making regular withdrawals from his bank accounts, which had previously been electronic deposits of his state paycheck, and instead made only large cash deposits. His bank records revealed over $840,000 in unexplained expenditures that significantly exceeded his legitimate mayoral salary, none of which were disclosed on his tax returns. FBI Special Agent Robert Beekman noted instances where Kilpatrick would hand protective detail officers envelopes of cash to pay his credit card bills. The documented tax evasion and the significant unexplained cash expenditures are not merely additional charges. They represent a deliberate and crucial strategy of financial opacity employed to sustain the Kilpatrick enterprise. By systematically failing to report illicit income and making large, untraceable cash deposits, Kilpatrick consciously attempted to obscure the true extent and source of his ill-gotten gains. This indicates a clear awareness of the illegality of his actions and a systematic effort to hide them from authorities, which is a hallmark of sophisticated criminal operations. This financial concealment was essential for perpetuating the corruption without immediate detection, demonstrating a calculated approach to evading accountability. This section details the culmination of the federal investigation in a comprehensive trial, Kilpatrick's subsequent conviction, his lengthy prison sentence, the appeals process, and the eventual presidential commutation of his sentence. Following his state-level convictions and probation violations, Kilpatrick was indicted on extensive new federal corruption charges in 2010. The indictment implicated a network of co-conspirators, including his father, Bernard Kilpatrick, his contractor friend Bobby Ferguson, and former Detroit Water Department Chief Victor Mercado. The federal corruption trial was protracted, lasting for months, and the jury deliberated for an intensive 14 days before reaching a verdict. On March 11, 2013, Kwame Kilpatrick was convicted on 24 of 30 federal felony counts. The convictions encompassed a wide array of serious offenses, including racketeering conspiracy, extortion, mail fraud, wire fraud, and tax crimes. The jury's unanimous verdict affirmed that Kilpatrick had systematically used the Mayo's office to enrich himself, coercing contractors into pay-to-play schemes, diverting the Kilpatrick Civic Fund for personal use, accepting numerous bribes and kickbacks, and failing to pay taxes on over $840,000 in unexplained income. The prosecution collectively referred to this extensive criminal operation as the Kilpatrick Enterprise. Key co-defendants also faced convictions. Bobby Ferguson was found guilty on 9 counts, and Bernard Kilpatrick was convicted of filing a false tax return. Victor Mercado, the former Detroit Water Department chief, pleaded guilty to his role in the conspiracy. While state-level charges addressed specific offenses like perjury, it was the comprehensive federal investigation and subsequent trial that truly exposed the vast scale and systemic nature of Kilpatrick's corruption, leading to its designation as a racketeering conspiracy and a criminal enterprise. This highlights that complex, deeply entrenched public corruption often necessitates the extensive resources, investigative techniques, and legal tools of federal agencies such as the FBI, IRS, and EPA-CID to be fully investigated and prosecuted effectively. The sheer number of counts and the conviction of numerous co-conspirators underscore that Kilpatrick's corruption was not an isolated incident, but a pervasive network, indicating a depth of criminality that local authorities might have struggled to address independently. In October 2013, Kwame Kilpatrick received a severe sentence of 28 years in federal prison for his role in the racketeering conspiracy. This was noted as one of the toughest penalties ever handed down for public corruption in U.S. history, signaling the gravity of his crimes. The sentencing judge, Nancy Edmonds, recommended that Kilpatrick be incarcerated in a prison in Texas near his family. He was initially incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution in El Reno, Oklahoma, and later at the Federal Correctional Institution I in Oakdale, Louisiana. Kilpatrick consistently sought to overturn his conviction through appeals. His attempts were repeatedly denied by various courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, which rejected his appeal in June 2016. His legal arguments included claims of impermissible hearsay, violations of his right to a fair trial due to the grand jury selection process, insufficient evidence for a racketeering conviction, and that pervasive media attention had prevented a fair trial. The imposition of a 28-year federal prison sentence represents a profound judicial condemnation of Kilpatrick's actions, directly reflecting the extensive and systemic harm inflicted upon the city of Detroit. This exceptionally harsh penalty, explicitly noted as one of the toughest for public corruption in U.S. history, serves as a powerful and unambiguous deterrent message to other public officials contemplating similar abuses of power. The consistent denial of his numerous appeals by higher courts, culminating in the U.S. Supreme Court's refusal to hear his case, further reinforces the robustness of the evidence and the integrity of the legal process. This demonstrates the ultimate capacity of the justice system to hold even powerful and politically connected figures fully accountable for their crimes, signaling that no one is truly above the law. After serving approximately 7 years, 76 months of his 336-month sentence, Kwame Kilpatrick's prison sentence was commuted by President Donald Trump on January 20th, 2021, just hours before Trump left office. The White House statement noted that the commutation was strongly supported by prominent members of the Detroit community: Alveda King, Alice Johnson, Diamond and Silk, Pastor Paula White, Peter Carmanos, Representative Sherry Gay Dagnogo of the Michigan House of Representatives, Representative Karen Whitsett of the Michigan House of Representatives, and more than 30 faith leaders. The statement also mentioned that Kilpatrick had taught public speaking classes and led Bible study groups with fellow inmates during his incarceration. Prior to this commutation, Kilpatrick had sought early release due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but these requests were denied by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The presidential commutation of Kilpatrick's sentence, while a legal exercise of executive power, introduces a significant political dimension to the conclusion of his lengthy legal saga. Despite the severity of his crimes, the comprehensive federal conviction, and the judicial affirmation of his guilt through multiple appeals, a political act intervened, leading to his early release. This highlights the complex interplay between the judicial process, executive clemency, and the influence of public opinion and advocacy. Kilpatrick's subsequent public endorsement of Donald Trump for the 2024 presidential race further suggests a transactional or politically motivated aspect to the commutation, raising questions about the underlying motivations behind such executive actions and their potential impact on future political dynamics, particularly in crucial swing states like Michigan. This demonstrates how, even after a rigorous and lengthy legal process, political considerations can ultimately alter the course of justice, potentially undermining the perceived finality and deterrent effect of severe sentences. Kwame Kilpatrick's corruption left a profound and lasting impact on the city of Detroit, affecting its financial stability, public trust, and prompting significant efforts toward reform. Kwame Kilpatrick's corrupt administration significantly exacerbated the crisis that ultimately led to Detroit's historic bankruptcy. While federal prosecutors acknowledged his corruption was not the sole cause of the city's long-standing financial woes, they affirmed it worsened the situation. During his tenure, Detroit faced immense financial challenges, including huge deficits and an unemployment rate of 14%. His misuse of city funds directly resulted in $14 million in lawsuits against the city, further draining public coffers. The severity of the corruption was such that Kevin Orr, the emergency manager appointed to oversee Detroit's bankruptcy, explicitly cited Kilpatrick's case as a prime example of why the city's own officials could no longer be trusted with its financial matters. Orr highlighted that such a level of corruption raised serious questions about the city's leadership and its ability to manage its affairs effectively. The direct financial costs of Kilpatrick's corruption, including $14 million in lawsuits, an $8.4 million settlement, and hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted for personal use, are substantial and measurable. However, the deeper and more profound impact lies in how his administration exacerbated the crisis that led to Detroit's historic bankruptcy. This indicates that public corruption is not merely about the direct theft of money. It fundamentally undermines a city's financial stability, systematically diverts critical resources from public services, and severely erodes investor and public confidence. The statement by emergency manager Kevin Orr underscores that Kilpatrick's actions directly contributed to Detroit's loss of self-governance and financial autonomy, representing a profound and lasting consequence that extended far beyond the immediate monetary losses. Kilpatrick's period in office is widely regarded as one of the most challenging in Detroit's political history due to the pervasive public corruption, His actions were seen as a lack of human decency mixed with racial betrayal, particularly impactful given his status as a black mayor serving a majority black city. This corruption directly harmed black businesses by removing fair competition and deprived communities of needed resources through the misuse of nonprofit funds. This betrayal fostered deep distrust among citizens, potentially discouraging civic engagement and voting. In response to the widespread corruption, Michigan voters overwhelmingly approved a ballot proposal instituting a 20-year ban on public officials convicted of corruption felonies from holding any elected or appointed position with control over public assets or policy. Beyond this constitutional amendment, the city of Detroit has implemented a number of other significant changes aimed at making it more difficult for future instances of public corruption to occur, reflecting a concerted effort to rebuild trust and fortify governance structures. The impact of Kilpatrick's corruption extended beyond mere financial damage to a profound and lasting erosion of public trust, particularly within the very black community he was elected to serve. This racial betrayal is a critical aspect, as it highlights how corruption perpetrated by a leader from a marginalized community can disproportionately undermine faith in the entire political process and civic engagement. The legislative response, exemplified by the 20-year ban on convicted officials and other governance reforms, demonstrates a direct, systemic effort to prevent the recurrence of such abuses. This indicates that the Kilpatrick scandal served as a painful but necessary catalyst for fundamental institutional reform, aimed at rebuilding public confidence and safeguarding against future abuses of power, fundamentally altering the relationship between the citizenry and their government. Kwame Kilpatrick was released from federal prison on January 20th, 2021, following the commutation of his sentence by President Donald Trump. Since his release, Kilpatrick has re-entered the public eye, often speaking about his faith and personal transformation. He has preached at churches, including the historic Little Rock Baptist Church in Detroit, and expressed that he feels free, not just from a prison or a physical prison, but also a mental, political, and emotional one too. He and his wife, Letitia, are launching movemental ministries, signaling a transition from politics to the pulpit. Kilpatrick has stated that his past experiences will help him connect with others and spread his message, emphasizing authenticity and his journey from past struggles. A notable aspect of his post-release activity has been his public expression of gratitude to former President Donald Trump for commuting his sentence. In June 2024, Kilpatrick endorsed Trump in the 2024 presidential race. He has also engaged in public discourse on other issues, including the Flint water crisis, questioning why officials who knew about the issues earlier were not investigated or indicted, suggesting a continued interest in public accountability, albeit from a different vantage point. Kilpatrick's post-release public narrative heavily emphasizes personal transformation and spiritual redemption. However, this narrative is immediately complicated and potentially undermined by his explicit political actions, particularly his endorsement of Donald Trump, who granted his commutation. This suggests that his redemption is not purely a spiritual journey, but also carries significant political implications, potentially being instrumentalized by political actors for their own gain. His public comments on the Flint water crisis can be interpreted as an attempt to re-engage with broader public issues and perhaps re-establish a voice in civic matters, but also as a subtle deflection from his own past or a critique of other political figures. This complex interplay between a personal narrative of change, political opportunism, and public memory highlights the enduring challenges of accountability and the potential for figures like Kilpatrick to remain relevant in a polarized political landscape, even after a dramatic fall from grace. The trajectory of Kwame Kilpatrick, from a promising rising star to a convicted felon, represents a cautionary tale in public service. His initial ascent, fueled by political pedigree, legislative achievements, and a charismatic appeal that resonated with Detroit's aspirations, quickly gave way to a systematic dismantling of public trust. The sequence of events, from early financial improprieties and the unsettling Manugian mansion rumors to the definitive exposure of his perjury and the vast federal racketeering enterprise, illustrates a progressive and deeply entrenched pattern of corruption. Kilpatrick's crimes were multifaceted, encompassing not only personal enrichment through misuse of city funds and credit card abuse, but also systemic extortion, bid rigging, bribery, and tax evasion that fundamentally undermined fair competition and diverted critical resources intended for the community. The revelation of his deceit through text messages served as a critical turning point, demonstrating how modern digital footprints can serve as undeniable evidence of misconduct, making concealment increasingly difficult for public officials. The consequences for Detroit were severe, contributing to the city's financial crisis and ultimately its historic bankruptcy. Beyond the measurable monetary losses, Kilpatrick's actions inflicted profound damage on public confidence, particularly within the very community he was elected to serve. This betrayal prompted significant institutional responses, including a state constitutional amendment banning convicted officials from public office and other reforms aimed at fortifying governance structures and rebuilding trust. Kilpatrick's legal reckoning, culminating in a lengthy federal prison sentence, underscored the justice system's capacity to hold even powerful figures accountable. However, the subsequent presidential commutation of his sentence introduces a complex dimension, highlighting the interplay between legal outcomes, executive clemency, and political considerations. His post-incarceration activities, marked by a narrative of personal transformation alongside political endorsements, reflect the enduring challenges of public memory and accountability in a polarized environment. The legacy of Kwame Kilpatrick serves as a stark reminder of the critical importance of robust ethical oversight, transparent governance, and unwavering public vigilance in safeguarding the integrity of democratic institutions. And that's a wrap on today's dive into deception, dollars, and the dark side of finance. If this story shook you, shocked you, or made you question just how deep corruption runs, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a twist in America's most infamous financial crimes. Share this episode with fellow true crime fans, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and what cases you want us to cover next. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and remember, even the strongest empires can have corrupt roots.